Westfield, New Jersey, is a definition of the American suburban idyll. It is a town of manicured lawns, broad porches, and tree-lined streets where the shadows are supposed to be comforting, not menacing. It is a place where people move to escape the chaos of New York City, seeking a sanctuary to raise their children in safety. The houses here are not just structures, they're status symbols, monuments to success and stability. But on a quiet stretch of road known as the Boulevard, one magnificent home stands as a testament to a very different kind of reality. It is a place where the walls have ears, and the windows are not for looking out, but for someone else to look in. 657 Boulevard is a grand, six-bedroom Dutch Colonial revival built in 1905. With its shingled facade and imposing stature, it commands attention. When Derek and Maria Broaddus bought the property for nearly $1.4 million, they believed they had secured their forever home. They imagined summer barbecues in the backyard and Christmas mornings by the fireplace. They saw a future filled with laughter and peace. They did not see the eyes that were already fixed upon them from the darkness, waiting for the ink on the deed to dry. They did not know that the house came with a legacy, a guardian who claimed ownership not by law, but by obsession. The nightmare began with something as mundane as the mail. It was a warm evening in June, just 3 days after closing the sale. The moving vans hadn't even finished unloading. Derek was painting the dining room, the smell of fresh latex and old wood filling the air. He went to check the mailbox expecting bills or perhaps a welcoming note from a neighbor. He found a thick, white envelope. The handwriting was clunky, perhaps disguised, addressed simply to the new owner. It felt heavy in his hand, significant. He sliced it open, expecting a warm greeting from the community. What he read stopped his heart cold. The letter did not start with welcome. It started with a history lesson that sounded more like a threat. The writer claimed to be the third generation of their family to watch the house. They spoke of the house as a living entity, something that needed to be fed. But then, the tone shifted from bizarre to predatory. The writer knew about the children. He asked if they had found the secrets within the walls. He asked if they were going to fill the house with young blood. The air in the grand hallway suddenly felt thin. Derek looked out the front window, scanning the street. The neighbors were walking their dogs. Cars were driving by slowly. Any one of them could be the author. The sanctuary had been breached before they had even spent a single night. The letter ended with a signature that would become infamous, a name that would haunt the family for years and turn their dream into a psychological prison. The Watcher, and the watching had only just begun. We often tell ourselves that our home is our castle, a fortress against the evils of the world. But what happens when the fortress itself becomes a trap? We are diving into one of the most unnerving true stories of the last decade. A case that proves you don't need ghosts or demons to haunt a house. Sometimes a pen and paper are enough to destroy a life. This is the story of the Broaddus family and their terrifying ordeal at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It is a story about the fragile nature of privacy and the terrifying realization that someone out there knows your routine, your children's names, and your deepest fears. This case is unique because it isn't a murder mystery in the traditional sense. No bodies were found in the basement. No blood was spilled on the floorboards. Yet, the violence inflicted here was psychological. A slow burn torture designed to drive a wealthy, happy family to the brink of insanity. We are going to explore the chilling letters that arrived with clockwork precision, the suspects that included strange neighbors and local eccentricities, and the police investigation that seemed to hit dead end after dead end. We will look at the theories. Was it a jealous neighbor, a real estate scam, or something far more ancient and sinister attached to the land itself? The Watcher letters are a masterclass in terror. They reveal an intimacy that shouldn't exist. The writer noticed when contractors were in the house. They noticed when the children were on the porch. They taunted the family with the specific layout of the rooms. This level of surveillance implies that the stalker was close, perhaps right next door, or perhaps watching through high-powered binoculars from a distance. The police found DNA, they found clues. But the identity of the Watcher remains one of America's most frustrating unsolved mysteries. This channel explores the dark corners of reality where the inexplicable meets the terrifying. If you want to join our investigation into the unknown, I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We upload the stories that the mainstream media often forgets. Go ahead and click the like button to help spread this mystery. Maybe someone watching this video holds the key to the identity of the Watcher. And before we unlock the front door of 657 Boulevard, I have a question for you. I want you to go down to the comments section right now and tell me, which country and city are you watching from? Are you in a busy apartment complex, or a house in the suburbs where the neighbors are just a little too quiet? Let me know in the comments below. Now, check your mailbox and close your blinds. The purchase of 657 Boulevard in June 2014 was the culmination of the American dream for Derek and Maria Broaddus. Derek, a hard-working executive at an insurance company, and Maria, who had grown up in the area, saw the house as a symbol of their success. It was a sprawling 1905 Dutch Colonial revival, the kind of home that features in magazines, sitting proudly in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in New Jersey. They weren't just buying wood and stone, they were buying a lifestyle. But that lifestyle was dismantled in a single evening. The first letter, found in the mailbox before they had even moved in their furniture, set a tone of archaic, possessive madness. The letter began cordially enough, "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard," but quickly descended into a chilling narrative of ownership. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. The writer spoke of the house as if it were a sentient beast, asking, "Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here?" I will find out. It was the specific questions about their children that turned Derek's confusion into primal fear. The Watcher wrote, "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. TSK, 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 ... bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy." And then, the knockout blow, "You have children. I have seen them. So many names. Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me? Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." The Broaddus family did not move in. How could they? The image of a stranger calling to their children to draw them to him was enough to paralyze any parent. Instead, they continued the renovations during the day, hoping this was a sick, isolated prank. But the Watcher was not a prankster. The Watcher was a hunter. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. This one proved that the surveillance was constant, active, and terrifyingly accurate. The writer knew the children's names. He knew their nicknames, names that Maria only shouted across the backyard. The second letter mocked Derek's attempts to secure the home. "I see you found a new contractor," the Watcher wrote, likely observing the work trucks in the driveway. But the most disturbing aspect was the knowledge of the interior layout. The writer asked, "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" "I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better." The word plan hung in the air like a guillotine blade. What was the plan? Kidnapping, murder, a fire. The letter continued with a bizarre, almost supernatural personification of the house. "All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house." Who am I? I am the Watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are to Broaddus family. Note the misspelling of the name. Broaddus became Broaddus, a clue that perhaps the stalker didn't know them personally, but only through observation. Paranoia is a slow poison. Derek and Maria began to analyze every face on the boulevard. In a town like Westfield, neighbors are supposed to be allies, but now, every wave from a porch could be a taunt. The police, led by Detective Leonard Lugo, began to focus on the immediate vicinity. Their logic was sound. To know the things the Watcher knew, you had to be close. You had to have a line of sight. This brought them to the Langford family. Living directly next door to 657 Boulevard was a house that stood out for the wrong reasons. While the Broaddus home was pristine, the Langford home was overgrown, with peeling paint and a collection of lawn chairs arranged strangely in the backyard. The family was led by the matriarch, Peggy Langford, who was in her 90s, and her adult children, all in their 60s. One son, Michael Langford, was described by neighbors as odd and a bit of a Boo Radley character, recluse who rarely worked and spent his days wandering the property and the neighborhood. The police brought Michael in for questioning. It seemed like the perfect fit. He was always there, he had the time, and he fit the profile of a social outcast. But Michael denied everything. The interrogation yielded nothing. There was no smoking gun, no stack of letters found in his bedroom, no confession. Without hard evidence, the police couldn't arrest him. The Broaddus family was frustrated. Derek even hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, to stake out the Langfords. They found nothing but a quiet, eccentric man living a small life. The DNA found on one of the envelopes a trace of saliva under the flap belonged to a female. This threw the Michael Langford theory into chaos, unless he had a female accomplice, perhaps his sister, or his mother. But the DNA didn't match the Langfords either. The trail was going cold. Desperate for answers, Maria Broaddus turned into an amateur detective. He set up cameras everywhere. He spent nights crouching in the dark of the empty house, watching the monitors, waiting for a shadow to approach the mailbox. He hired Crawl, a high-end security firm, to run background checks on the entire neighborhood. They looked for financial distress, criminal records, anything that would indicate a motive. 2 other suspects emerged. One was a man living nearby who was a known gamer. He played a dark, immersive video game where he played as a character named the Watcher. It seemed too coincidental. The police interviewed him, and he agreed to let them speak to his girlfriend. But she missed 2 scheduled interviews. Eventually, when they did get a DNA sample, it didn't match the envelope. Another dead end. Then there was the Chambliss lead. Investigators found 2 lawn chairs facing 657 Boulevard and a localized patch of woods behind the property, a perfect vantage point for a stalker. But this too led nowhere. The investigation was becoming a circus. The Broaddus family was bleeding, money paying the mortgage on a house they couldn't live in, paying rent on another home to live in safety, paying lawyers, paying private investigators. The stress was tearing them apart. Derek admitted to being consumed by the mystery, unable to focus on his work or his family. The Watcher was winning without ever showing their face. In a shocking twist, the victims became the villains. When the Broaddus family filed a lawsuit against the previous owners, the Woods family, for failing to disclose that they too had received a letter from the Watcher days before the closing, the story went national. CNN, The Today Show, and magazines picked it up. Suddenly, Westfield was swarming with news vans. The Watcher house became a tourist attraction. People would drive by, slow down, and take photos, terrifying the neighbors. The community of Westfield turned on Derek and Maria. At a town council meeting, when Derek proposed tearing down the house to subdivide the lot into 2 smaller properties, a way to recoup his financial loss and destroy the Watcher's object of obsession, the neighbors were furious. They argued that tearing down the historic home would ruin the character of the street. They cared more about the aesthetic of the neighborhood than the safety of a family being hunted. The proposal was rejected. Rumors began to swirl that Derek had written the letters himself. People whispered that he had buyer's remorse, that he realized he couldn't afford the renovations, and concocted the story to get out of the sale or to land a movie deal. This conspiracy theory devastated the family. They were living in a horror movie, and the audience was rooting for the monster. Then came the 4th and most violent letter. It was a direct response to the family's attempt to sell the house. You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. The letter then threatened physical harm in a way that was plausible and terrifying. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire. Maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break. The Broaddus family realized they could never win. The house was a cursed object. They managed to rent it for a short time to a family who had large dogs and a fearless attitude, but even then, the menace hung over the property. Finally, in 2019, 5 years after the nightmare began, they sold 657 Boulevard for $959,000. They took a loss of nearly $400,000, not counting the renovations and legal fees. The new owners moved in. The neighborhood held its breath. Would the letters start again? Would the young blood be requested? To this day, the new owners have reportedly received nothing. The silence is almost as disturbing as the letters. It suggests that the Watcher had a specific fixation on the Broaddus family, or perhaps they felt their work was done. They had successfully defended the house from the outsiders. The case remains open but inactive. The DNA evidence sits in a database, waiting for a match that may never come. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The psychological profile suggests someone older, well-read, but likely of lower socioeconomic status. Someone who envied the wealth of the people inside the house. But profiles are just guesses. The truth is walking the streets of Westfield. 657 Boulevard still stands in Westfield, New Jersey. The lawn is still manicured, the porch is still inviting, and the shadows still lengthen across the street every evening. It remains a beautiful shell, but its history is stained with ink and fear. The case of the Watcher serves as a chilling reminder that we are never truly alone. Our privacy is an illusion that can be shattered by a 50-cent stamp. The Broaddus family escaped with their lives, but the scars of psychological warfare did not fade easily. They were forced to abandon their dream because a stranger developed an unhealthy obsession with their sanctuary. It forces us to ask, how well do we know our neighbors? Who is watching us when we close the blinds? And what would you do if you opened your mailbox tomorrow and found a white envelope addressed to the new owner? We may never know the true identity of the Watcher. They dissolved back into the anonymity of suburbia, leaving behind a legacy of terror. Perhaps they are watching this video right now, satisfied that their story is being told. If you enjoyed this dive into the madness of 657 Boulevard, please subscribe and share this video. And remember, sometimes the house doesn't just have eyes, it has teeth. I'll see you in the next nightmare.